Today we're talking to Joy Duxbury, Professor of Mental Health at Manchester Metropolitan University. Joy is also Associate Professor at the University of Melbourne and in 2014 won a National Mental Health accolade, the Eileen Skellern Award. We'll be speaking to Joy about the big issues that surround her subject at the moment and how her research can relate to ways in which we can aim to tackle those challenges. So Joy, to kick things off, please can you tell us a little bit about your research interests and a bit about yourself?
I worked in forensic settings mainly, in inpatient settings, and I got to see lots of the different challenges that you see as a nurse in those settings. And that started my research journey, I think, in some regards. So whilst I really enjoyed the clinical side of things, I started questioning many of the practices we were using and why we were using them. And started scrutinising some of the difficulties we were experiencing as practitioners and maybe how some inquiry and evidence base could contribute to that. So that was the start really of me having a questioning lens on organisations and settings and therapeutic relationships, particularly what didn't work in therapeutic relationships. And then as a result of that, I went on to do my PhD and never really looked back from there, I think. Got the thirst, got the skills, got the tools to start looking at research. And I guess where I am now, which has resulted from my journey as a practitioner and as a practitioner researcher, is that some of the practices that we use, particularly in some of our institutions and inpatient settings, are not always the best and are not always done for the right reasons and can actually do more harm than good in some situations and some settings, and particularly with vulnerable groups such as people with mental health problems and people with learning disabilities. So as we went along, we started, as I said before, questioning those practices. And I think now we recognise, and there's certainly plenty of thought about this out there and research, is that many people with mental health problems have complex trauma histories or have had serious life events or challenges along the way that as practitioners we need to think about and need to address. And so in many instances, putting a spotlight on trauma and how best to support people and understand their perspectives about things has become paramount for us. And I think the other thing to say is that a lot of the research we do is called co-produced research, and is incredibly based upon working with experts by experience, service users, their families, their social support networks, in trying to determine what the key issues are for them. So rather than us as researchers just saying, okay, this is something we want to look at, this is something we want to research because we think it might be interesting, it's about asking the people that it really matters to about, well, what's important to you? Where are the gaps? Where are the things we need to do? And how do we go about doing that with you and for you? So I guess that's where we're at the moment.
So what's the key motivator for your research then? Are there any kind of key events in your life that made you want to go on this path into mental health?
I guess that's a really interesting question. I'm not sure I've been asked that by many people. I mean, from a very personal perspective, my mother suffered with very serious enduring mental health problems, and they didn't actually, I think we didn't really realise that she had a condition and a mental health problem until I was in my late 20s. I think there'd probably been signs there when I was growing up and all through my life, but we hadn't really, I think, realised that the nature of her difficulties until she eventually got admitted to hospital and got a diagnosis, and was very ill actually for quite some time. And I suppose, so that from that personal perspective, it's important to me because I saw all the suffering that was related to that, both in terms of how she suffered, but as a family, I think how we suffered as well, and some of the things that we needed to consider. And then when I did actually do I did my general nurse training first of all, and then when I did my mental health placement, sort of had a bit of an affinity and thought, oh gosh, I think I might actually like this area of practice. And it's only when I then did my training that I felt I'd found a home in a sense, in terms of practice. And then when I started practicing became a qualified mental health nurse and became a ward sister quite quickly, and really enjoyed being able to make a difference, I think, in some of those settings as a team, and seeing a lot with what was wrong at that time, and how we could as a team put things right. You know, we were fortunate very early on when I worked down south in Surrey, that as a team we won a national mental health nursing award for some of our work. So I think we were quite, as a team of people, we were quite ahead of the game back then in looking at that institutions were problematic places, and particularly from a nursing perspective. And so, yeah, I think my passion has always been there.
You mentioned there about your mother and her experience and what it was like to have a mental health condition in the past. How do you feel about the way that the shift to destigmatise mental health problems? Do you feel like there's been a lot of progression in that field? So what it's like to have a mental health condition even 10 years ago would possibly be more difficult to manage than it is now?
No, I think that's a good question, Laura. And I think we have come a long way, actually. There's still a long way to go. But of course, you know, I mean, a lot of people will be very familiar with the publicity that's just generally out there and on the TV, you know, whether it's the Royals now sort of suggesting that or opening up about the fact that they've had mental health difficulties, lots of celebrities. An organisation called Rethink quite a few years ago now launched something called Time for Change, whereby they promoted the idea of mental health using lots of celebrities like Stephen Fry, Ruby Wax, various people who championed the whole issue of mental health. And whilst it isn't exclusive to, obviously mental health just isn't exclusive to celebrities and the likes, you know, I think it is quite important that people do see that there's a range of individuals out there that, you know, some people idolise these folk, don't they? And recognising that they are human beings at the end of the day, and that we all have mental health problems, and we know now that there's constantly a shift in sands, isn't it, in terms of statistics about the figures of how many people do suffer with mental health problems. But we know it's actually a significant amount of people in society that either will have enduring mental health problems or will suffer some sort of mental health episode at some point during their life, whether you're a young person or whether you're an old person, right across the spectrum. You know, and I think it's out there a lot more now, and it's recognised a lot more. I think the sad thing is that whenever there is a very unfortunate incident in society at the extreme, so for example, if somebody murders somebody, you know, and then it happens to transpire that that person might have had a mental health problem, it does a lot of damage in terms of re-stigmatising everybody, because of course, you know, it's not just people with mental health problem that might murder somebody. You know, there's all sorts of people out there that for various reasons might commit a serious crime. Doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a mental health problem.
It does seem like there's been a shift as well in maybe the reporting of events like that, where they look at the reasons that led to someone doing something like that rather than just they had a mental health condition.
Yeah. I mean, you used to see the headlines years ago, didn't you? Sort of, it was like schizophrenic did this, you know. And I think language is hugely important as well, because again, everybody is a person with a story at the end of the day, aren't they? And I'm not condoning crime by any stretch of the imagination, but I think people do find themselves in very unfortunate positions sometimes, and mental health difficulties can be a significant part of that. And so, yeah, I think we have come a long way. As I said, I still think there's a way to go, but I think we have come a long way, and it feels much more inclusive than it had been. That said, I suppose the big caveat is that we know that people with particularly, as I say, serious mental health problems that are enduring and sort of a lifelong, you know, their lifespan is shortened significantly than other members of the general public. So the inequality aspect is still huge and needs to be addressed, you know, whether or not it's people that, you know, because of the lifestyle that they lead, because of the mental health problem, because of the psychotropic drugs that they have to take, you know, which have huge life-limiting side effects, or whether it's that they might find themselves in societal situations that make their life very difficult, or that they might use coping mechanisms such as substance use to try and get through. So all of these things together can affect people's ability to have a fruitful life. So that is something that really needs a lot of work, and a lot of the policy and a lot of the guidelines now do talk about parity of esteem, which is about looking at physical and mental health together, because the two things can't be separated.
Just to contextualise how your research plays into that. So for example, I know, like, say for example in the NHS there's lots of focus on mental health practices, say integrating that into how staff treat patients from the very beginning. Could you explain how research kind of plays into that, and if there's anything that you're working on that links to that?
Yeah, I think mental health nursing or anything mental health related that's to do with professionals, and it's often very interdisciplinary mental health. It's no different to any area of research, I guess, or any speciality, whereby research is hugely important in not only looking at the nature of the illness itself, but in looking at how we look after people who have those illnesses. So clearly for us, I guess as we are social scientists and those working with me in my team, mixture of nurses, psychologists, social workers, we all work together as researchers looking at this area. And we have to examine and have to be quite reflective on looking at some of the practices, as I said earlier on, that we use. And so for us, it's really trying to look at how we can make a difference in streamlining and making those interventions and practices much more, I guess, service user orientated or person centered. So a lot of the work we do it is trying to address some of the inequalities or some of the, what I call, it sounds like quite a big term, social injustices that people experience, particularly in organisational settings. And what I mean by that is that there are many instances whereby we might intervene in a way that, again, I said this earlier, that can do more harm than good. And particularly this thing called coercive practices, which is something we've been doing work in for many years now. And that's the things, so some of the interventions that we use in our inpatient services, unfortunately, can be quite problematic, and even other things that we might want to try and avoid at all costs, that they still happen. And I'm talking about things such as seclusion and restraint. So there's physical restraint and there's chemical restraint that get used in some organisations in order to try and I use the term broadly, manage conflict or manage difficulties in those settings. And so we're all about trying to actually minimise the use of those practices, which have been used for years, but we now know are very much overused in many settings and can lead to all sorts of psychological and physical trauma for all the individuals involved. So we're very much at the heart now of trying to find out how can we avoid having to get to that point, because there are many things that we can do in order to prevent having to use these very extreme approaches, such as laying hands on somebody and actually physically restraining them for whatever reason. And it's all around the environment. So much work's been done, and you asked me before, Lauren, about, I know it was about stigma, but how things have changed. And even in terms of some inpatient mental health units now, and again, it can be quite varied geographically, but I think we've come a long way just in terms of how units are designed now. And again, many units are designed in trying to bear in mind to make them livable places. They're not just somewhere to contain somebody. They're spaces where you need greenery, where you need lots of light, where you need lots of air, where you need lots of space, where you need privacy. And all of these things can make a massive difference to people's lives if they do have to go into hospital, which mostly they don't want to do anyway. And again, many service users and expert by experience and the public are asked to get involved with designing those things about, if you had to stay in this space, what would it look like? What would you need? and all those sorts of things. I'll just give you an example that I know of a young lady. There was a very high profile case a few years ago, a young woman who has learning disabilities and autism called Bethany, and there was a massive sort of expose about how she was treated in a hospital down south, a private mental health hospital, and basically she had been segregated for about 2.5 years, so she was only a teenager, but it'd been literally, and we're saying this is a mental health hospital where people are supposed to go for respite. This is a harbour, this is supposed to be a place of safety, but for whatever reason, and often cultures can play a part in this, negative cultures, was kept in segregation, so in one room that was almost cell-like for 2.5 years, with no contact with her family or friends. Even when her father visited, he could just put his hand through a slat to hold her hand. And as you can imagine, the way she behaved towards the staff, you know, was quite threatening at times. But you've got to ask the question, well, how would you feel if you were being kept in those sorts of situations? And anyway, because of, for a variety of reasons, and all the right ducks got in a row, she was moved from that setting to a hospital, actually, in the north of England, where she is now. And, you know, it's just changed her life and her family's life completely, just because now she has her own space. She's allowed to paint the colours of her own walls. She has access to Zoom, to the internet. She has access to animals, to green spaces. You know, they take her fishing. So it's a mindset, isn't it? It's a way of thinking and looking at things. And it's crazy to think that we have to do research into these things to actually make a difference, but we do. You know, we have to look at what works and what doesn't work in order to make people's lives better, I guess.
Yeah, for me, it feels like there's kind of been a little bit of a shift where people that are tough with mental health issues who have been sectioned or put in a unit, it was seen in the public eye as to get them off the streets and to get them away from like the rest of the public, when actually we should be thinking about it as we're putting these people into these environments to give them a better quality of life, to actually care for them rather than just segregate them away from mainstream society.
No, and I think that's right. And again, it's only transient. It shouldn't be indefinite. You know, it's there to, like any illness, you know, if you've got cancer or whatever you've got, you know, you go into hospital for treatment and for support and for care, with a view to helping you. You know, because again, not all illnesses, not just mental health, not all illnesses can be cured, so to speak, but it's about any chronic condition, giving people the life skills to manage that condition. You know, and it is very much about that. And as I say, I think we do it a lot better, but also that there are still some areas where there's things that need to be done, and it's only by understanding individuals and from their perspectives with mental health problems, and not assuming that because they have a mental health problem that what they say doesn't count or that they're not making any sense. It's about us listening, and I think we have come a long way in that regard. And even just the fact now that I think service user involvement and co-creation is very much recognised as almost a must now. I think at one time it was something that was, you know, that there might have been some people doing as researchers that was thought to be good practice. But now you apply to any funder for significant research monies, and they will expect you to engage with the population that you're looking to research. You know, and not only to engage with them, but to take them on the journey with you, so that you are fully engaged. And I think that's the key, and that's how things are very different now. And that's what makes it a really exciting area to work in, and really productive. You know, gosh, what a difference.
I was going to say, I mean, you just mentioned then it must be quite emotionally and personally involving as well when you work on like so closely with people and hear their stories and their experiences. How do you deal with that? Is that something that, you know, for a postgrad researcher wanting to come into that field that might be, you know, a little bit wary of that side of things?
I think benefits outweigh the negatives, and you're right. I mean, I think whether you're a practitioner, a researcher, or whoever you are, or an advocate or a supporter, when you're working with people that have mental health problems, you know, there's often difficult things to hear, and I think it's just the overwhelming sense of the tremendous sense of satisfaction you get. I think when somebody maybe does, it's just appreciative that they are being heard, or that somebody is listening to them. I think most people that go into mental health, whether it's research or practice, normally do do genuinely care about the people that they're working with, and so there is that empathetic side, I think, that you grow and foster. And even though it can be quite sad, I think just making that change and making that difference is important. And of course we support each other. That's the nature of what we do. You know, it's important that you do have a team that you work with and work around you that is going to be supportive of that. After
hearing about all your research there, Joy, I just wanted to take you back a little bit and just to get a better picture of how you got to the stage you're at now. Did you go through a usual kind of academic route where you went through an undergraduate and postgraduate journey?
I didn't actually. I was slightly different. I came to academia quite late on. I guess it was just by chance. It was quite strange the way it happened for me. I never really did that well at school for a variety of reasons, and really didn't know what I wanted to do anyway. Sort of just went into nursing as something that, you know, there were various things you could do back then. It was either education or nursing or something along those lines. So just went in to do general nursing, and then there were no jobs. I did that in Liverpool in the early 1980s. Moved down south to get a job, and then just happened to come across some people who were doing mental health nursing and found it interesting. So then went on to do more training in mental health nursing. And then, as I say, in the particular area that I worked, moved through the ranks quite quickly, became a ward sister. So I'd been working in mental health for quite a few years and was really enjoying it. And thought that was me set for life. I was just going to carry on working as a practitioner. And we had some students that came over from a university in Northern Ireland just to do a placement, and they were doing a degree. And in a strange way, it's the first time I was exposed to people who were doing a degree. I used to do a bit of teaching at the local nursing college and used to enjoy it. And it was only when they told me a bit more about the particular degree that they were doing, which was actually a nursing education degree. And they were quite rare, and there were only a few at that time that were doing, only a few universities that were doing them around the UK. That I looked into it a little bit more, because you could get at that time funding to do this nurse education degree if you were a practitioner. And just by chance applied and got this funding, and so suddenly found myself going off to do this nursing education degree, having never thought that I would ever go to university. And I was nearly 30 at the time when I went, so it came quite late, as I say, to higher education. We did it full time and got a scholarship to do that, was funded for the full 3 years, and just loved it. And from there on in, as I say, just got a thirst for I guess inquiry and knowledge, which I just had never had before. I never really enjoyed school as a youngster. So I think there's a lot to be said for going into education sometimes when you're slightly older. So yeah, it was a bit of a strange roller coaster journey for me, having never, you know, literally just from some people turning up on our ward one day for the summer, completely changed my life. And then I just went on, did my degree, and just found that I enjoyed higher education, got a lecturing position, and then went straight on to do my degree. So I didn't actually do a master's then. I actually did my master's after my degree, after my PhD, which was a strange way of doing things. And I only went on to do my master's because I felt left out that I didn't have a master's. So, but yeah, it was really interesting. But best thing I ever did.
Yeah, it's funny those moments that just seem like a fleeting moment, but they can actually define quite a lot of your future.
yeah.
You mentioned there your PhD. Can you remember kind of what the topic
I'm not that old, Ian.
Can you tell us a bit about your PhD then, and
yeah,
what the insights were from that?
You need a lot of resilience, and you need to be quite dogged, I think. But I think my PhD just seemed to make a massive world of difference to me in my career. I've always been a one for networking. I'm a great believer. It doesn't matter what stage of your academic career you're at, or if you're a postgrad student or an undergraduate student. I say this to the students I talk to now: network like mad. Because the opportunities it affords you, I think, and the things it exposes you to, you know, can be significant. And just getting to know who are the key players out there in your area of research, and them getting to know you as an individual is really important. I think that was a game changer for me as well. You know, I got involved with some international networks post PhD very early on. And I think that opened a lot of doors for me, just getting to know some academics internationally and what they were doing. And you get to see what research is happening and how to do it. And the other thing that's been amazing for me is just supervising PhD students. You learn so much. I've learned so much about research methodologies just by supervising students doing different things.
What did you study for your PhD then? What was the topic?
Yeah, well, I guess it's what I'm in now. You know, again, it's all about this it wasn't called restrictive practices then. I mean, I noticed that at the time that there was a lot of conflict on inpatient mental health wards. And that it felt to me as if they were very untherapeutic environments. It felt to me like we were firefighting all the time. And that was all we were dealing with, was just constant conflict. And it just didn't feel to me as if we were making much of a difference to people's lives, because we were just trying to resolve conflict all the time. And so that was literally what I did my PhD on, was trying to get a feeling and understanding of what was causing all this conflict in inpatient settings. And that took me to look at the literature a little bit more on what caused conflict, and, you know, just trying to determine interventions you know, that are multimodal in how we can make environments more therapeutic, so that people don't feel there needs to be that conflict. We don't get the conflict, we then don't need to start to use restraint as much, or seclusion as much, or segregation as much. We don't need to over-medicate people as much, because actually we're talking to people more and we're understanding them more.
So what involvement do you currently have with students at Manchester Met?
Yeah, so a variety of things. I mean, we're in a very, very active, vibrant nursing department. Great team, lots of programs, undergraduates, pre-registration, post-registration, and postgraduate as well. So I do some teaching on the undergraduate nursing programs, often talking to the converted about, you know, making sure that we are therapeutic. So that's and some methodologies that we use, we talk about with students as well. PhD supervision, I do quite a lot of PhD supervision, as I've already mentioned. So supervising postgraduate students, particularly people doing their doctorates, which I really enjoy. And then we have you know, within our faculty, we have some very active, what we call research clusters. And one of those is the mental health research cluster. So increasingly now we're encouraging particularly postgraduate students to be part of the cluster and to get involved with the clusters. So that might be a mixture of seminar events, you know, just meetings, supporting them to write, getting involved with writing bids and all of that sort of stuff, really.
It's one of the reasons that we want to do these videos, is to kind of put it into a context that an everyday person could understand how research contributes to society and what the actual impact and outcome can be.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, I think that's probably prompted me to just say, you know, as somebody that was a practitioner who now, you know, has the ear of government and is able to impact upon policy, gets invited to committees, you know, parliamentary events, and is able to sort of be seen to be somebody that has some understanding of certain key issues. is immense, and I think any healthcare professional or any person wanting to do research, whether it's at MMU, and of course that's where we want people to come, or elsewhere, you know, as I say, if you've got the will and the passion, the networks and the understanding, I think, of the evidence, and you're committed to co-creation, you can make a world of difference. You really can, because there's nothing so powerful as evidence coupled with the voice of the experts themselves, in getting the ear of people that can make significant changes. So whether it's practitioners that you're helping, because, you know, again, the research that we've done over the years, we've produced all sorts of toolkits and resources that are out there, you know, so it's not just about writing papers that people may or may not read. It's about producing concrete tools for people to use and actually make change in their own organisations, and providing the networks for them to engage with so that they can make changes. You know, so again, that's what I said about networking. Isn't just as a researcher network's important, but when you're a practitioner, whoever you are, if you're reaching out to other people, you can learn a lot from what other people are doing as well. So, you know, if you have a question in your own area, you know, you might think, well, we understand that this needs to be done, but we don't know how to do it. You know, there's tons of stuff out there now that can show you how to do it. So it isn't just about reading a paper that says, okay, this is the gap, or this is what you need to do. It's the how that people often struggle with. And I think in health science these days, what's called implementation science, which is much more about the doing and how to sustain and support the doing, is a key area now. And that makes it even more exciting, you know, that you're not just doing a piece of research and then you're going away and you just hope for the best that people will carry on doing what you've set up. It's about making sure you've got systems in place that they can carry on doing that work, and changing people's lives for the better, for the longevity, you know, not just for the short term of a research project. Genuinely
though, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a thoroughly enjoyable interview. I hope you found it.
No, it's great. Well. Nice for me to have a chat with somebody, to be honest.